This meeting is being recorded. New York ReLeaf is an urban forestry program that's administered through a partnership between New York State Urban Forestry Council and the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, also known colloquially as DEC. There are 9 ReLeaf networks in New York that are distributed across the state. Each network brings people together to share best practices that support urban and community forests in the places we work, live, and play. My name is Amy McKenzie, and I'm an urban forester for the New York State DEC, working in the Mid and Lower Hudson Valley and with the communities in the Mid and Lower Hudson Valley from our New Paltz office. I am also one of 2 co-chairs of Hudson Valley's ReLeaf Network. You'll see on the slide there that we have a bunch of different newsletters to stay in the know about the urban forestry happenings in the state. So please consider subscribing to one or all of them. Next slide. This idea for today's presentation was developed at the Hudson Valley Region's ReLeaf meeting, the last meeting we had. And the topic of tree challenges caused by soil issues organically just rose to the top, and it was an easy choice for our next project. And here we are today. The Hudson Valley is a very diverse region. The next slide. Oh, yep. The Hudson Valley is a very diverse region. Some communities are very densely populated, while others are very rural. In terms of biodiversity, we are tops in the state, with the Hudson Valley holding 85% of the state's bird, mammal, reptile, and amphibian species. The Mid and Lower Hudson Valley is also the steward of a lot of water that drains into the Hudson River, and we steward the water supply for over 10 million people. That includes New York City and the Hudson Valley. That's half the state's population, but our land area is only 10% of the state's land area. So we need to foster healthy trees to keep all that water clean. As proven with all of you here today, the topic of unraveling the mysteries of what occurs in a tree's underground life has a lot of interest. Thank you all for being here. Next slide. For our continuing education credits, we've been approved for an array, and we have the Society of American Forester credits for certified foresters. We have International Society of Arboriculture credits for several of their certifications. And we have Landscape Architecture Continuing Education System credit that meets their health, safety, and welfare criterion. And that can be used for anything that system can be used for, landscape architecture, and I think a couple engineering certifications. And for our planners, our certified planners, we've got certification maintenance credits in 2 different categories. There will be a survey at the end of the webinar that we encourage everyone to submit. However, if you are seeking credits, you will only get them if you submit the survey. The Landscape Architecture Continuing Education System credit also requires you to request and submit a quiz to get those credit or that credit. Next slide. You will hear from 3 great speakers today whose presentations will improve your knowledge around what tree roots need from soil and methods you can use to provide those needs. Please enter your questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll save about 10 minutes after each presentation for the presenter to respond. Our first presenter is Angelo Shimberry, who is often asked, "What's wrong with my tree?" Unfortunately, that question is often asked years after rooting issues could have been prevented. Angelo is an International Society of Arboriculture certified arborist and owns CGL Arborist Services, CGL, I figured out, were his kids' initials of their first names, in Cornwall, New York, in the Mid-Hudson Valley. Angelo is also the president of the New York State Arborists Association, which is an association of professional arborists and educators that promotes public interest, fosters research and education in the care and benefits of trees, shrubs, and their environment. So thank you, Angelo. I'll have you put your show up and take it away.
Thank you, Amy. I just want to chime in that if things had gone according to plan, I would no longer be the president of the New York chapter ISA, but our conference and election got snowed out with the major storm we have. So I'm president for another 4 days, theoretically. So, but thank you for the introduction. Amy and I have known each other for over 15 years now. And although we worked for the same company and worked together and spoke to each other via cell phone and two-way radios numerous times, we met for the first time in a gas station accidentally. So I still remember that and just how odd it was to happen to randomly be in a gas station and bump into Amy. So as the whole presentation is a rock and hard place, and I think my section is kind of subtitled "Why My Roots Won't Stay in the Ground." So hopefully most of the people attending this will just be review for, and you'll know most of this already, and later parts of the presentation will actually provide some good solutions for you. So just basic biology, roots need 3 things. They need water, they need air, and they need nutrients. Roots grow towards water, they grow towards nutrients, and they grow towards gravity. So those are the 3 tropisms that kind of direct root growth. The problem is the need to grow towards gravity can be overcome by limitations of water, air, and nutrients. When we have sidewalks, we have a problem where the area immediately under the sidewalk has the air and the water. It's generally limited in nutrients, but that is enough to overcome the desire of the tree to force the roots to grow lower. So we have a soil under a paved surface, whether it's asphalt, concrete, pavers, pervious pavement, any of the top surfaces that we can use is typically highly compacted to support the surface that's going to be put above it. For drainage reasons, there's a thin layer of gravel, sand, or other hard to compact material that maintains drainage and air spaces, and the roots tend to grow in that area because there's availability of air and water in those areas. Since that's immediately under the paved surface, the roots have a tendency to disrupt or lift the surface above rather than compact the soil beneath. Here's an example of what happens if in this cross section of a root, I highlighted the pith or the center of the root, and top is up and bottom is down, and you can see the differential growth that has occurred on the upper surface of the root. People say to me all the time, my roots are growing up through the soil, and I say to them, yes, they are. It's easier for a root to displace a small amount of soil, 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches of soil above the root than it is to compact all of the most likely already compacted soil below the root. So that causes this type of asymmetrical root growth, and the roots grow upwards through the soil. In the areas that I work, which is most of the Hudson Valley and up into the Catskills, Southern Capital Region, the majority of the soils we encounter are heavy clay with a lot of embedded rocks. It is typically compacted, whether it's in the urban space or the suburban space. And the soil compaction before any paved surfaces go in is a challenge for many different types of trees that we commonly plant. The compaction that occurs when you install a sidewalk or driveway just makes the problem even worse. So what do? We plant trees and then the sidewalks get lifted and then we try and ramp them. And we either ramp or grade the sidewalks to eliminate trip hazards, and then down the road those fail. So here's two examples of ramping that has been attempted. So in some places where ramping doesn't work, we do, if you look on the right, we reroute a sidewalk around a tree. Now, lots of times people say, well, that's easy. Depending on who owns the sidewalks in your municipality, that may incur a whole legal aspect of securing new easements for the sidewalk to extend further into the property than as was originally laid out. So that's an added cost down the road. Or you could get really creative like they did on the left here, and there is actually a metal bridge over the sidewalk where the roots were. The better plan, the better process is to start out with something that we have a high probability of success with in the designing stage. Planning, a lot of urban street tree planning is still done by architects and engineers. Engineers are worried about infrastructure, they're worried about drainage, they're worried about trip hazards. Architects are worried about making it look really nice and be presentable and have something that a community can be proud of. Arborists and urban foresters are often consulted at the last minute or when there's a problem. Somebody told me a long time ago that, landscape architects, not to knock on landscape architects, but landscape architects, their goal is to make it pretty. And arborists, their job is to make it survive. And sometimes if those two groups aren't talking early on, it can be very challenging in the later stages. So we need to consult arborists or urban foresters should be consulted very early on in the planning stages to help avoid tree and paved surfaces conflicts. The push for aesthetics or convenience does not typically work well for long-term tree survival. So then we create a situation where, we go out, we put these metal grates in because everybody thinks that's going to work, and they've appeared on so many streets. There's a call out on landscape plans that's easy to do, and we put this little tree in this metal grate in this tiny tree well with impervious paved surfaces all around it. And 20 years down the road, we end up with the picture on the right. If you're familiar with the metal tree grates for tree wells, the one on the right is designed to be broken out, sections to be broken out as the tree gets larger and larger. And with many other aspects of municipal tree care, there's just not the time or the manpower to get out there oftentimes and do what everybody knows needs to be done. So the grates aren't broken out, the holes aren't enlarged, and you end up with situations like the grates girdling the trees. So the planning needs to be done from the ground up. The way we do that is we plan for adequate and appropriate soil in large enough quantity. And structural soils are not, from the aspect of tree root growth, they're not soil, they're stone for the most part. Structural soils serve a very important role when you have, say, a curb lawn with a tree in it, and then adjacent to that you have a sidewalk, and then adjacent to the sidewalk you have a regular residential lawn. Structural soils can be very useful in bridging the gap between the tree and the proper rooting area in the residential lawn. The problem is structural soils are typically installed somewhere between 6 and 10 inches in depth. And to be really effective, they need to be installed typically to about a 24-inch depth, which very, very few people are doing. Not to totally trash structural soils, but if you go back in time a little bit, structural soils were all the rage in New York State and many other areas in the Northeast. And the structural soil we use is typically CU structural soil, which is Cornell University structural soil. The composition and the rights to sell that, it's a patented process. And I've heard many people claim that university-based research is better than private industry-funded research because of the financial implications. I don't know what Nina Bassek and Jason Grabowski's deal was with Cornell when it came to structural soil, but I can tell you the standard deal for Cornell professors when they are part patent owner for something they developed while working at the university is 30%. So someone along the line with structural soil had a financial gain uh, as a result of pushing that. I'm not saying structural soils don't have their place, but I think that they are used as a Band-Aid, uh, and they're used in many situations that are not appropriate for what they were originally intended for. So our current tree planting models produce large trees by luck, not by design. The tree in that picture there, you can see the sidewalk is lifted to the right of the car there. But our current models have a lower front load cost. They're cheap to install. You dig a small hole, you make a small tree well, you put in a small tree, and it's pretty inexpensive for a municipality to do, but they have a much higher backload cost. So as the trees get larger, you're looking at milling sidewalks, you're looking at replacing sidewalks, you're looking at tree removal and replacement, you're looking at potential lawsuits down the road. The models that use silvicells or other subsurface soil rooting mechanisms cost a whole lot more to install up front, but the long-term cost and the ability to consistently provide larger urban canopies without the continual cycle of plant, maintain, remove, replace is in the long term a much better value for most communities. The problem is coming up with that upfront cost can be very, very challenging for most communities. So when you're doing planting, lots of times people don't know where to start. How do I plant? What's the right way to plant? Well, there's guides that exist to help the decision makers when it comes to tree planting. The first guide that I typically turn to are a series of standards. They're called the ANSI A300 standards. It covers every aspect of tree care. They're developed by TCIA, Tree Care Industry Association, ISA, and input from many other stakeholders in the tree care industry. They're updated very frequently, and we just recently switched. It was all in one book, then they split it out into each different area had its own book, and they just put it back into one book. So if you're involved with tree planting and tree maintenance, having a copy of the A300 on your desk would be a good place to start. The A300 does not read easily. There are constant should and shall lines in the A300, and should is a recommendation and shall is kind of a mandate. So in order to make that a little easier for people to deal with, the best management practices were developed. So we have best management practices for tree planting. We have best management plan practices for soil management for urban trees and for root management. And these are all sold individually. You can get them as some of them as a digital download. They are available, most of them in Spanish as well. And this would be another great addition to your library to help you make good tree decisions from the start. If you look at the tree planting picture, I will say that the gentleman is backfilling the hole before the burlap and the cages have been completely removed. So somebody needs to definitely update that picture. So straight out of the BMPs is this paragraph right here. The potential for conflict with infrastructure is high when one or more of the following exists. We're using fast-growing species that are large when mature. Urban tree plantings are often leaning towards fast-growing species because everybody wants a quick result. Everybody wants that large, mature canopy. The species are typically shallow rooted. A lot of the trees that check that first box also tend to be shallow rooted. The distance between the tree and the infrastructure is less than 6 feet. That's most urban street tree plantings. Trees are planted in restricted soil volumes, compacted or shallow. Again, that's almost all of them. And there's limited or no base materials beneath the paved surfaces that are adjacent. So we check almost, if not all of those boxes. And just by reading through the BMP, you're going to know that you're going to have an infrastructure conflict at the end of the project. So it provides some good guidance that's easy for everybody to understand. So I know my time is almost up. I timed this perfectly because Amy said she was going to cut me off. If you're not familiar with this book, you should be. I think this is the second most important book for urban tree managers. It's Up by Roots by James Urban. If you don't have a great soil background, this will get you a great soil background. And it's all about, both in urban and suburban places, how the soils impact the end result.
Mhm.
I highly recommend it. This is a book everybody should take the time to get and peruse. And the most important book for urban tree managers is still The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, because this really just, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. If you're an urban tree manager, you must be the Lorax. Whether or not you realize it, if somebody isn't out there advocating for trees, the end result is not going to be good for trees. So that is my 15 minutes.
Thank you,
I
Angelo.
am going to stop sharing. There we go. I went over by 42 seconds. I'm sorry.
Well, thank you, Angelo. Your presentation clearly demonstrates why investing in providing soil conditions that grow root systems, strong root systems, is essential to unlocking all the benefits that urban trees can provide. We have a few questions in the chat that we have a couple minutes to ask you to answer.
Sure.
Doug Gutierrez is our Westchester County forester with Westchester County, and he asks, can structural soils support the utilities within those 24 inches of depth? And are there any problems with utilities and roots in structural soil?
Historically, there were more problems with roots infiltrating things like conduits, water lines, sewer lines. As everything has transitioned to thermal welded plastics or even glued plastics, the roots don't know what's inside of a pipe. If something's leaking out of the pipe, like a sewer line is leaking out water and nutrients and it's a source of oxygen, roots are going to grow into that. As we have gotten better at sealing up our pipes, that conflict has been reduced. However, because of our rocky clay-based soil and our freeze-thaw cycles in southern New York, in the Northeast, buried utilities do not always make the most sense. We have to bury water lines, we have to bury sewer lines, but the freeze-thaw cycle can introduce breaks into those utilities. So if that's going to be done, and it can be done successfully, the key is providing enough structural soil and enough of a sand or stone dust buffer around those utilities, and then using a biobarrier around that sand layer as well typically works the best in preventing roots from infiltrating or damaging utility infrastructure.
Thank you. We have another question from Jeffrey Lambourne. His question is, what is a good range of upfront cost to install an urban tree where one exists currently? What considerations are there on replanting in a location where the tree was removed? A tree was removed.
I'm going to leave the costs to later presenters on this. I make the advice. I don't look at the cost. That is not part of what I do, thankfully. Replanting where a tree was removed, you have to figure out why the tree was removed in the first place. If it was removed because it just aged out, well, then you're probably going to have a good chance of replacement. If it was removed because you had a disease or insect problem, replacing with the same or similar species probably isn't going to make much sense. And the list of suitable street trees at the same time, while we keep shrinking it as we're moving away from non-native species, it's expanding at the same time as nurseries are bringing to market native species that the industry has been asking for to replace other non-natives. One of the really good examples of that is 10 years ago, you could not find American plum in a nursery at all. You had to go to a specialty grower. Many nurseries now carry it because it is a much more viable replacement for purple leaf plum, which is not native, prone to disease, prone to uprooting, and full of problems.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. And the question is, what can non-specialist community members do to get involved with street tree decisions and maintenance to ensure these sound long-term plans are implemented? I think that question's more towards me, right?
I think it's both of us because I also serve as my local tree warden, and I serve on my CAC as well. So if your local community doesn't have a tree board, you can go to your local community, whether it's a mayor or a supervisor, you can ask that one be formed. Most communities have a CAC or a CAB or an environmental review board, and that's a great way to get started. Sometimes it takes knocking on that door for many cycles before somebody's going to open it. Some of those associations tend to be a little bit insulated, but reach out, and at the local level, if you're in a village or a town, this is where your voice actually counts. I just did a breakdown in the town I live in. Your vote is one of 3,000. In my county, it's one of 300,000. In my state, it's one of 3 million. So go to town council meetings, go to urban planning meetings. If your town is doing a comprehensive plan review, get involved with that. There are lots of ways to reach out through the municipal level to make things like this happen.
And on the state level, each state has an urban and community forestry program, and there are foresters like me in every state. In New York, we have 9 different, we're broken up into 9 different regions, and there's a urban and community forester in each region. So reach out to your state liaison too.
Yeah, New Jersey has
Join
the
a
Shade
ReLeaf
Tree
group.
Federation. Every state has something.
Yep. Yeah, by law they have to.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Angelo.
Thank you. I am going to mute and stop my video, but stay here to listen.
Great. Now it's time to hear from our next presenter, Brent Nepper, who is the other half of our Hudson Valley ReLeaf co-chair pair. And he's also the city of Kingston, New York's urban forester. We're very lucky to have stolen him from Chicago. Brent, if you wouldn't mind putting your presentation up, I'll read a little bit more about your presentation and you. We all know that sidewalk conflicts with trees are a common problem that can cause dangerous conditions for pedestrians. Brent's presentation will outline how one sidewalk conflict in Kingston was resolved last summer, while also preserving and even improving the rooting area for those trees. So no further ado, take it away, Brent.
Thanks so much, Amy. So yeah, again, I'm Brent Nepper. I'm the urban forester for the city of Kingston. My little talk today is called Preserving Trees in Sidewalk Design. This is going to be a focus on a case study that we did here in Kingston. Some key points, kind of general purpose. It's what we're all talking about today with trees and root space. I'm going to look at it from like a municipal asset design level. Any municipal assets, ideally, we want them to be structurally sound, resilient to weather, have a long service life, and meet community needs. And designing those municipal assets as a system is our best way to avoid unnecessary cost and risk. And there are benefits to designing these with trees in mind. Here in Kingston, we're a small city. We have just a little over 3,000 street trees and 80 to 90 miles of sidewalk, a lot of which is bluestone. For a community that's only about 8.5 square miles, that works out to about one tree every 150 feet or so, which is also usually our general parcel size too. So a decent density for a small urban environment. So one example of that is a update that we did in the past summer on Wall Street in our Uptown neighborhood. This includes a before picture. You can see this is blacktop that was poured over, multiple iterances of it. There are 4 shade trees in this 100-foot section of blacktop sidewalk that's going to be updated. At the time, there's a lot of pavement cracking and uplift as a result of the root conflicts from compacted soil. The original sidewalk plan, pretty standard for installing new sidewalks, excavating materials, compacting subgrade, base course gravels, and then the hardscape going in on top, in this case, bluestone. And I've highlighted that although this wasn't called out in like any formal plan, it would have involved cutting through about 40% of the existing tree roots as they were conflicting with a new sidewalk from being laid flat with no slope changes to it, that sort of thing. So a question that is worth asking is what outcomes are probable from severing 40% of tree roots? Best case scenario, in the short term, you'll have dead branches. Where cut roots, we can usually look up into the canopy as a simplification and find dead branches resulting from those cut roots. First 5 to 10 years is when you could expect something like that. In medium term, we're talking 10 to 20 years, the trees might decline. Pests, disease, decay could develop in those trees. The trees will also try to survive, of course. The roots will just regrow under the sidewalk. And as a result, the root and sidewalk conflict cycle restarts. For the most part, these are nuisance and maintenance items to consider. And then long term, we'll again have that pavement uplift and cracking leading to replacement, which generally leads to a lower service life, a shorter service life. If we think about a concrete sidewalk made of Portland cement having an average 40-year service life, we could expect this to reduce it somewhere around 20 years. So half the service life of that municipal asset of the sidewalk. But at the same time, the trees have the possibility to die from stress requiring replacements. Those trees have a much longer service life, of course, and as a result of them dying, their service life would also be reduced by several orders of magnitude more than the reduction of the sidewalk. I see this as unneeded expense when there are other ways to design. Of course, there are worst case outcomes when you do not design to incorporate the existing tree roots. This is a little dramatic on my end, but I use it to make the point of when there is no longer the anchor support of tree roots on the sidewalk side, be it from cutting the roots for a sidewalk project, or just further compacting over those roots, which could lead to root decay and decline, and as a result, no longer being structurally sound. It's a simple formula. the force of wind during storms, multiplying the load at the tree weight, but without any of the support of the roots on the sidewalk side, has a very probable outcome of a whole tree failure. Personally, I would like to avoid this outcome, and I think most urban and community foresters are quite often thinking about this with their plans. So for that refrain, we come up with a new sidewalk work plan. The main changes are focusing around excavating the top 24 inches of existing materials by hand and air excavation. The original blacktop and stuff, that still had the capacity to be removed with an excavator without causing root damage. This is a retrofit application. Today, we're talking about pros and cons of structural soils. Structural soil not being like a modular structure that has finite size or not being modular, not having finite size requirements means that it can really fill organic shaped voids. Think about the soils that you might excavate around tree roots when trying to preserve tree roots. Using hand labor or air excavation to do the work minimizes the damage of the structurally most important roots in the trees. And then after the installation of the structural soil, which was designed to still be able to reach that 95% proctor of compaction that engineers and sidewalk designers think about so much, the top layers of it, the more aesthetic parts and the hardscape, can still be put on as normal in that situation. So here's some progress photos of it. On the left, you can see that a excavator is installing the structural soil from a parked dump truck. One recommendation with structural soil is that you want to keep it damp. That clay that's acting as the binder for the other materials and the large supporting stone, they really want you to keep that damp. Luckily, although the time of year we were doing this was pretty hot, we had high humidity levels and a lot of rain going on too. Using the excavator, the tracks actually creates a lower PSI pressure on the soils compared to, of course, tires, and in some cases even less pressure than human feet going on. So it's a way of using machinery where we're not struggling with additional compaction, which is what we're trying to alleviate with this retrofit design. On the right, we see further along in this progress, the new materials. This is a bluestone sidewalk with brick paver edging to it, have been installed. The workers are now bringing in topsoil, and then we'll have seed and straw put on place to keep a planting strip on the side of it. Take a look at the one worker who is walking towards the far end of the frame, not holding the wheelbarrow. He's standing over a section of sidewalk that is now all brick pavers. This is ADA approved, and by having the brick pavers being put over structural soil, there is an increase in air and water percolation to below for those who were listening during Angelo's talk about what tree roots need. Some more details of this completed work. On the left, you can see that there was a total reduction in the width of the sidewalk around these trees. This allows for that tree root flare that all us arborists love so much to continue to grow. The sidewalk is doing a up and over approach around the tree roots. Some were at a high enough surface level. I regret that I didn't have like a good photo of that like air excavation where you only see the roots and all the soil has been removed above and below, but timing didn't really allow for it. In this case, the slope that's going over these like most surface level tree roots ended up at about a 2 degree, still within ADA standards for going up and over. And visually, for most people that are going to be using the sidewalks or those who might have some concerns that they want to share about sidewalks and ADA compatibility, the slope is very hard to notice. It may also just be something that we see in any kind of community with any kind of rolling terrain of just a generalized slope. To talk a little bit more about the ADA aspects, these are really great numbers to know and metrics to use when thinking about keeping trees in a sidewalk reconstruction process. Top one, I was just touching on that. The ADA allows for a max slope of 5% or 1/20 for doing that up and over kind of work. There are allowances for narrowing sidewalks. I think that's really important in our Northeast urban communities where we don't have a ton of space building edge to building edge compared to how some newer developed communities might have. So to that end, sidewalks under ADA Chapter 4 walking surfaces can, for a very short distance, go down to 32 inches wide and still be ADA compliant. They can't do this for more than a 24-inch distance. I think that's very important to note. So only for 2 feet can it go down that wide. We think about the size of most street trees. I think that gives us some breathing room to work with, because as we get to the third point there, after that 32-inch wide reduction, the ADA would want at a minimum to go back to 36 inches wide for a minimum of 48 or 4 feet distance. And in general purposes, ADA Chapter 4 says that when a sidewalk is less than 5 feet wide, for every 200 feet, a passing area must be included. That passing area gets defined in a few different ways under ADA. So if that's something that you really want to focus on, I really consider looking at that Chapter 4 walking surfaces, specifically part 403.3 and 403.5. Talk about the financial considerations for these projects. I think this is something that everyone listening on this webinar right now, it's useful information to have. Bluestone restoration sidewalks in a historic area are not cheap to do, of course. Unfortunately, no sidewalks are cheap to do these days, but the original project would have worked out to around $80,000 in cost. For a relatively small portion of deviations from the original plan to include the structural soil, which in the process does reduce the amount of total ROB base aggregate gravel that would have been used otherwise. So there is a little bit of makeup with that, but of course, structural soil will be more expensive than your plain old gravel, specifically the one that is the CU trademarked structural soil blends. There's an increased time aspect with doing this project, as you can expect with the hand excavation around the tree roots. I gave the contractor a lot of information around air excavation and how to do that, but it was a little over their threshold for what they were willing to consider at that time. So they had the manpower and they focused on hand excavation instead. And I had to be there on site to make sure everything was going well, but it worked out well, and I was very happy that by engaging with the contractor in a kind and understanding and problem-solving way, they then also wanted to work with me too. So that led to about a $10,000 increase in price for the project. I would say in average, when we're doing structural soil retrofits, kind of giving a soft number here, but say 2 to 4 mature trees in that section, it's probably going to be an increase of around $10,000 to $20,000. Of course, your results may vary. There's some other unaccounted for costs if we do not do this work, of course. I mentioned them earlier, but the prices of pruning, hardscape maintenance, these trees that now have their roots cut, track certified arborists may be at the point of considering them to be hazard trees that need removal in a 1 to 5 year time frame. Of course, there's costs for that building too. You may have noticed that building was quite shaded by those trees. So now that building has to spend more on cooling costs. A lot of urban municipalities also have at a minimum a requirement that when one street tree is removed, a new street tree is planted. So those are kind of just very obvious financial costs to think about that may not have been reflected in the initial budget of what would be a simple sidewalk installation without tree root spacing. Of course, the other costs that I'm not in a position to put a number on, but are even more important to think about, is when something goes wrong. Damage to vehicles, damage to buildings, damage to utilities, the dispatch for emergency medical services, fire, public works to come out for cleanup of these things, and of course, the potential for injury or loss of life. This is municipal asset design. We need to think about their safety when we're doing these projects. Some additional considerations outside of just those financial costs, because I think a lot of us are probably thinking about street trees beyond just financial costs, right? The average life of a forest tree, from the source I provided, it's about 160 years for most of our canopy species in the northeastern forest. Whereas the average life of a street tree is 23 years. That is not evenly distributed, of course, and so I kind of give a note to what that might look like, because oftentimes there's different age numbers thrown around for how often we see street trees die. A lot of them do die in the first 7 years. 30% is a very reasonable number to me. In the first 15 years, another third, and 25 years, another third. All of these generally because of these additional stressors that urban trees face. Limited access to air, water, and nutrients, pollution, damage, heat stress. These are all factors. So when we think about trees, such as the ones in the case study that I'm sharing today that have made it past that 25-year mark, they're already just the only, let's say, 10% that have survived after all of these attempts at planting trees. It's important to think about when we take into the fact that for a street tree to reach carbon neutral, or carbon neutrality, I should say, factoring in the cost of growing the tree, the nursery, the materials for transporting the tree, the fuels, and that sort of thing, we see that a street tree doesn't really reach carbon neutrality until somewhere between 26 to 33 years. So we may not be sequestering carbon and dooming the few trees which do, if we're not designing for things like root space in our municipal structure designs. I mentioned these at the top of it, but the things that I want you to really take away from this is that municipal asset design, we want it to be structurally sound. We want it to be resilient to weather. We want it to have a long service life. We want it to meet public space needs. And if we don't, there are unnecessary costs and risks. But most importantly, I've used the word municipal assets a lot, and I would like everyone to start, if you're not already, considering street trees as municipal assets. If we give them the same level of attention in design to make them structurally sound, to encourage them to be resilient, to provide them what they need for a long service life, I find that they meet quite a few needs of the public space and of our community. And with that, I want to say thank you to everyone. Happy planting and happy designing. Looks like I ended up going a little bit faster than I thought, but hopefully there's some questions that people have.
Amy, we lost your audio a bit.
I figured out the problem. Can you hear me now?
Amy, I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And it's such a forward-thinking and practical solution. I hope everybody takes a lesson from it. We have about 10 minutes for questions. And it looks like we have one from Ben Mertz. Do you expect additional maintenance costs because of the pavers over concrete?
I'll give you two answers to that one, Ben. In short answer being yes, I do expect additional costs. In the situation that the 24 inches of structural soil provided is not enough. I think 24 inches, as Angela mentioned, is kind of the minimum, but the comparative costs of not doing it, I think, are higher. So that is kind of the one double-edged sword to this thing. I don't think anything really has and obviously this is not what was said, but I don't think anything has a zero maintenance cost to it. But yes, it is important to think about in these retrofit applications, what maintenance costs might come down the road. Those brick pavers, they may have a shorter service life compared to the bluestone, but they are spec'd at a width that would then allow for a bluestone slab to go over the top as well.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Jeffrey Lamborn. Would air knife soft digging utility clearance requirements be an asset or hindrance compared to the hand digging you describe?
Air knife, we're talking like air spade, air excavation, I think is
I
what's
think so, yeah.
yeah. So, like the type of excavation where we're using compressed air to blow away soil that is not basically enough force to do damage to the really crucial tree roots. I mean, I consider them an asset, right? Like any opportunity that we have to remove compacted soils around trees. Amy and I have talked about it before. I like how Amy expresses this, where the tree finally gets to go and quite literally breathe again, whereas limited to before. I think it's an asset in that lens of air excavation is also very fast compared to hand digging. The accuracy is more easily guaranteed. You're just dialing in a pressure gauge and having an appropriate size compressor hooked up to that air spade versus needing to oversee perhaps multiple workers that may have different thresholds for how tough they want to dig, that sort of thing. It can be a hindrance from the lens of cost. Again, that kind of question of front load or upfront versus back load costs. You got to rent the compressor, which is a tow behind trailer size compressor. A small like truck bed mounted one probably won't provide you the air volume versus the air pressure to do air spading. So you're looking at equipment rental. I would definitely get a experienced air spader to be doing the works, ideally someone who's a certified arborist as well. So you're looking at day rates for a specialist to use the air spade as well. But there is kind of an over and under, right? So how many hours do you spend with multiple just general purpose crew workers digging versus maybe 1 day cost for air spading? Personally, I've seen, around a mature tree, air spading to, let's say, a depth of 24 inches. Probably half a day is what I say. Amy, what do you think about that number? Half a day sound right?
Yeah, yeah. Someone that knows how to use an air spade can get the job done fast.
Yeah,
Give themselves
exactly.
enough time to go home and shower because they're going to need it.
Yeah,
It's the dirtiest job out there.
Having
yeah.
done airspace work, Brent, I would say you're right on. For a mature tree, it's about half a day.
Got it. Okay, yeah. And anyone who may be interested in, getting involved with air spading, I think it will just become a more and more important aspect of municipal work, similar to how like hydrovacing really got on the scene over the last
Yep,
decade or so.
yep.
Um, I don't really recommend hydrovacing for root excavation, but if the alternative is a bulldozer, hydrovacing has some merits to it as well. Might be cheaper or easier to get someone to do hydrovac work, but ideally air spade is like the most efficient process to do. So if you see an opportunity in the market there to get involved with air spading, also invest in Tyvek suits. That will save you quite a lot of cleanup. But yeah, other questions, Amy?
Okay, our next question is from Hayo Gunter. Is there any data on the results from the freeze-thaw cycle exclusive to the use of structural soil?
I don't have any.
Yeah, I've never heard of it either. And we have our next question from Wei. Brent, the time for street trees to reach carbon neutrality is 26 to 33 years. Meant for those trees, those trees reach mature state, right? Does it include the prematurely declining trees or those that never reach their mature state?
I wish I had that answer off the top of my head,
Yep.
but with presentation mode and the flood of adrenaline right now, I don't have an answer for that. But I think that's a really good aspect to think about. Like, is that 26 to 33 years relevant to say that 10% of trees that survive because it includes the loss of the other 90% of trees? Would we be reaching a lower threshold of age for carbon neutrality if that is the situation, if we are providing trees as municipal assets, the resources that they need to where we have less die-off in that first 7 to 25 years? But that's just kind of me talking and speculating. I don't really, I can't answer Way's question directly right now.
Okay. We have a question from Janelle. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Question from Janelle. When is the right time of year for the health of the tree to do this type of work?
Yeah,
Good
great
one.
question, Janelle. It's almost as if you saw the slide I deleted, but dormancy. Our dormant period is when I generally recommend doing this work. I've heard arguments for doing it midsummer as well. I prefer dormancy because of the narrow window of time in like the late fall and late spring when the soils are still easily air spaded, but there is a little bit less transpiration happening between tree roots and the no longer around tree leaves. I've heard the other argument that midsummer, while it's more stressful because of heat and dryness, the resources of the trees are not stored in as many roots at that time of year because it's actively photosynthesizing. But to then go midsummer means you need to be providing for the moisture and sunlight aspects of these now exposed roots. But I'd love to hear inputs too. It seems like Amy, Angelo, maybe you guys have some stuff to add as well.
I can say I've air spaded trees full sun middle of the summer because that was the only opportunity to do it for whatever reason. The way I have always overcome this is lots of burlap and lots of water. And as you're exposing the roots, you're covering them with burlap and hosing them down. Because it's not just the sun and the atmospheric dryness, it's the wind from the air spade is continuing to dry the roots out as you're going through. And when it comes to the fine feeder roots, it doesn't take much to dry them out to the point where they're just gonna no longer be productive. So it can be done, but I agree with Brett. Spring and fall are generally the best times to do it. If I had to choose, I would do it in the fall rather than the spring, just because you want the stressor to occur as it's going into dormancy, if possible, rather than when it's coming out of dormancy. But I have transplanted with an air spade 10-inch diameter trees, and it was done just before they broke dormancy, and we had a great success rate with doing all of those trees. It really comes down to the knowledge of the person who's doing the work, and they have to be willing to take the extra care, but that increases costs as well.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the first thing Angelo said there, I think, is probably the most realistic part of it, is that we often don't get to choose what time of year we're doing the work. For some people may have noticed that in the photos of it, there's not any tree protection going on in this construction project that was happening. This was a very reactive moment. I wasn't notified about this work going on ahead of time, so it was a scramble to prevent the roots from being cut. and working with the contractors like in the moment. And I think that's generally the case when it comes to when the decision for air spading gets met too. It's just like, when's the work happening? We will do the air spading the day before the work happens.
Very good. Brent, there's a lot of buzz in the chat about the tags that you used for the trees.
Oh, okay.
And also, people are asking if we're going to send out information to follow up this webinar, and that is true. So I'm going to ask you to provide Christina and I the information about the tree tags so that we could put that in that email so that it's accessible to everyone.
That sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Brent. And thank you for your questions, everyone. And we're moving on to our next presenter. I have a personal experience to share related to our last presenter. About 15 years ago, I signed up for a course just to earn International Society of Arboriculture continuing education credits, and it happened to be with Al's business partner. In that one presentation, I learned more about soil specific to the built environment than I had in all my years of arboriculture before that, and I even went to forestry school for 4 years. And I hope you all gain the same. Well, this is just going to build on Angelo and Brent's presentations too. We're really trying to, make it stick here. Let's welcome Al Key from Deep Root Green Infrastructure LLC. Al's presentation today is going to explore innovative methods to enhance urban tree survival and growth in limited green spaces. So, Al, if you wouldn't mind loading up your. Uh-oh, did we lose Al? Oh, there he is. I see.
No, I'm right here.
Loading up your presentation.
There we are. Hopefully this will happen. Got it?
There it is. Yep.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, first off, I want to say thank you very much for having me here today. And I sort of am a little sheepish going after these people who I really respect, these trained arborists with their everyday experience and their knowledge and stuff like that. I am a lay person, right? So I do have 30 years of experience based on in trees and stormwater. And I have to give a shout out to Angelo showing up for Up by Roots by Jim Urban. I consider myself a mentee of Jim, and I have 2 copies of that book. Both are well dog-eared, and one of them is signed by Jim. Jim is an asset. He is largely retired now, but if you'd like to get in touch with him, I'll give you a cell phone number. He'll pick up and he will gladly opine on anything about trees, soils, structural soils, municipal arboricultural problems, municipal arboriculture issues, anything you want about trees. He's a great guy, and I consider myself a mentee of his. And so the joke is if you disagree with anything I say, I'll just blame it on Jim, right? So I'm here to talk about options for planting trees in limited green spaces. And we're talking about structural soil cells, and then custom systems as well. Over here on the right, we have a structural soil system that is working. This is in Boston, Massachusetts, right in front of the aquarium. Those 2 trees in the foreground are in structural soil, and the trees in the background are in open planters. You will note that the tree on the right is outperforming the tree on the left, both the foreground ones, and neither of them are outperforming the trees in the open planters. So the main message that I want to come in today is that regardless of structural soil type, planting trees in real soil always outperforms structural soils. You'll even note that the tree on the right here is closer to the structural soil the open planter in the background. And that's the reason why, in my opinion, it looks a little better than the one that's has a further to go out there. Also, I wanted to say that, am I doing this? Hold on. There we go. There we go. Good. I'm a registered CEU provider with LACES. That's the Landscape Architecture Continuing Education Service. I think Amy, anybody who wants a CEU for today's session will have to fill out a quiz. The ASCE and AICP also honor ASLA LACES certificates, but I need to know who you are. I need to know your email address, and I need a quiz and a survey at the end of the course. And then I can send you one HSW PDH, that's a 1 hour credit to you directly. And I think Amy has distributed those as well. So compaction in our urban environments is a double-edged sword. We compact all the soils within city environments to 95% in order for it to hold up pavement. The double-edged sword is regardless of the amount of, whether you measure it in bulk density or in proctor density, compaction is root limiting once you get to about 1.6 grams per centimeter in bulk density, or about 80% proctor density, regardless of soil type. Likewise, as compaction increases, infiltration decreases. All right. So essentially, we are building, or have traditionally built, effective drainage channels for dead trees. Water is a resource. Keeping it on site is something that we would really like to do. It is often mandated by the DEC in the state. And I would say, where there's a lot of talk about budgets, if we can raid the stormwater budgets, we can help pay for these, these more expensive systems like mine, like the silver cells, these suspended pavement systems. So some sort of box that you put underneath the sidewalk to support the to support the sidewalk is what I'm selling here, or what I'm proposing for people to do. And I have I don't want to spend a lot of time selling you guys different my products, right? This is not, I'm concerned about your impartiality. For Brett and for Angelo, there are a number of manufacturers. I'll be going into those, but I assure you that we have fully thought this out. And Jim Urban, who Angelo spoke about briefly, it was instrumental in the development of this product class. And to just show you what we've done in New York, I'd like to show a few projects of what we've done, and then we'll get into the course proper. East Midtown Greenway is our most recent large project in New York City. This is a bridge from 54th Street up to 59th Street, which is meant to be part of the bikeway all around the island of Manhattan. This is these are the silver cells being installed. And then I was there last summer, took a picture of virtually the same place. Likewise, New York City DOT and their Plaza program, we have about 3 of these in the ground. So it's amazing what happens when you grow trees in a loamy soil. It really, this is really good stuff. Our largest installation in New York City is Hunters Point. This is 21 block faces of silver cells. They're in 2 different phases, the grayed off portion on the left and the colored portion on the right. This remains a prime example of using trees for stormwater purposes. The stormwater budgets are the largest budgets of all, water budgets in cities are the largest budgets of all, much larger than police, fire, parks, any of that sort of stuff. And this is just a really great example of a permitted stormwater project that we have in the state. And the way it works is it's pretty simple. There is silva cells underneath the porous paving on the right-hand tree there. The sheet flow goes across the sidewalk into the porous paving, and then exits out through the silva cells, slower, cleaner, and cooler, and less. It's just basically a sand filter to do these things, and the good news is the trees get big. The most interesting project that we have in New York City is the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This is on the blocks between 79th Street and 83rd Street. The 4 blocks there are all done in approximately 100 trees and 90,000 cubic feet of soil. What's really interesting about this is that just underneath the plaza here are the 2 potable water delivery mains for all of Manhattan. And you can see in the photograph here that the silva cells are more shallow on the left and then go down deeper on the right, just as they're avoiding those 2 water mains. Really, this decision to put trees on the plaza was made at the highest levels of city government, because there was discussions, shall we say, between DEP, who did not want any trees near their water mains, and the iconic people in parks and in the museum itself. So anyway, Mike Bloomberg got involved with this one. This dates from 2013, the installation. There are four areas of trees. There are actually 4 bosques, or 2 to each side of the famous stairs, and there are 2 alleys of lindens. And this is another stormwater project in that from the left-hand side of the trees here, the water goes from the center of the trees there over into the curb and gutter, just as it would normally if this was completely paved over. But from to the right of the left-hand tree over to the channel drain on the lower right-hand side, all the water sheet flows into that channel drain and then goes into the cells themselves, as does the water from the building face into that same channel drain as well. And I would say that in all cases, when you use this porous paving or somehow get water into these trees in these systems, that is a preferred method of doing it. Trees need water as well as uncompacted soil to survive. So those are our big hits in Manhattan. We have about 75 projects throughout the state. And this is sort of the beginning of the course that I'm going through here. And so we're going to talk about 3 different ways to do this sort of stuff. There are custom systems, there are soil cells, and then there are structural soils. For custom systems, there are various different ways to install those or to build those. I'll give you a few examples. And in structural soils, there are 2 main flavors. We've been talking about gravel-based structural soil, or CU soil primarily is being used in New York for Cornell University. Nina Bassick and Jason Grubowski developed that. And I'm amazed at their knowledge about trees. I have a great relationship with both of them. And the other one is sand-based structural soil, which I don't really, I think it has a dichotomy about it, which is unacceptable for municipal tree work. And then there are various different kinds of soil cells, and I will go through those as well. There's post and decks, there are segmented ones, there are connected ones, there's cap and sift cells, and I will go through those as well. I mentioned soil, and I would say that one of the biggest problems we have is the soil industry screens all their soils. Soil is a bit like food in that it should be, the less processed it is, the better. So we're big believers in unscreened soil. Work by Barrett Kays and Susan Day is clear that the unscreened soils, unprocessed soils are far outperformed screen soils. Screen soils were developed in the turf industry for golf courses and playing fields and that sort of stuff. What is great for grass is not necessarily great for trees. And this is in all cases that street trees like unscreened healthy, untampered with soil. The less processing, the better. Just to show you an example, the Martin Luther King Memorial in DC, just off the mall. In 2010, when I took this shot of the soil in the silva cells, oh my God, I thought it was terrible. How could this soil isn't very dark. It's really, there are all these clods and peds, and you know, there's no measured sand content in this thing. And my mentor, Jim Urban, was thrilled with it. I didn't really understand this until later on. I went to the site and I saw the American elms performing like that. So yeah, please, less processing the better with all the soils, and unprocessed soils outperform processed soils in all cases for trees. So with that, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about the custom systems that are installed already, and how that happens. The oldest installation that I know, let's see, it's got to advance, there we go, is Northumberland Avenue in London. This is from the embankment at the Thames up to Trafalgar Square. On the left-hand side, you can see Lord Nelson at the top of Trafalgar Square on his column there. And what this is a grade beam at the back of curb, and a grade beam over on the building face, and then steel spans the distance between the two. This dates from 1898. I was there in 2018. I took a picture of it right there. And these trees, this is the oldest suspended pavement system that I know of, period. I didn't know about it until Mark Johnson, who is at the University of Ulster, wrote his book, Street Trees in Britain, A History. If you want to know more about this particular installation, I would call Mark Johnson and or get the book. I have a copy of it, and it's very tantalizing the way it's all written. But the best or oldest suspended pavement system that I know in the U.S. is the Christian Science Center in Boston, Massachusetts. This is a custom poured-in-place system of columns and beams for tree soil, and over a parking garage. This is an intensive green roof. And so the sheet flow comes across this area, the area of the paving, enters in through porous paving where the trees are. It's about 700 cubic feet of soil per tree. And we would never design it this way these days. These monotypic stand of lindens like this would just, we would never do it this way. But what's really interesting about this is that this was the style in 1968. And this was never permitted for stormwater because it predates the Clean Water Act. Kind of interesting that way. This type of system is alive and well. This is the Chicago Riverwalk Theater. It's a Sasaki project. And there are two types of receptacles in here. There are concrete receptacles for soil, and then also receptacle tanks for water. So the rainwater that falls on this thing is channeled into plastic tanks that are being housed underneath the stair complex, and then pumped out into the custom poured-in-place system of vats, if you will, voids for tree soil. Another really good example. I have been trying to get another photograph of these. The trees are doing very well. You know, this is, I think, 8 years in or something like that. There's the closed canopy now. So my apologies about this old photograph. And then, so that kind of covers the these custom systems that you can do. Those tend to be the most expensive way of combating compaction in our urban environments. And so we've talked a lot about structural soil today, and I would like to say that I am not a fan of structural soil. I love Nina Vasic and Jay Sikrowoski. I've known them for 30 odd years. Nina's now retired. And this is only a minor part of the wonderful work that they've done up at Cornell. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I do think that there is a better way of doing CU soil with my products. I think it's, well, anyway, I'll get into that later. So the general idea is that there's a skeletal soil that has particles, and the load is transferred through those particles into the subbase, and you can drive a tractor trailer over this stuff, and yet you're going to have uncompacted soil between the particles. This has been carefully studied in Brooklyn, and this particular paper, this site has been studied for 30 years, and the general idea is that on the left-hand side you have willow oaks and Quercus palus pin oaks, and on the right-hand side in the CU, so those are all on open planters on the left. On the right-hand side, they are in CU soil, and it looks similar from side to side, and they are similar from side to side, and you get the idea. However, there is a flaw with this in that the 1/3 of the planters are open to the adjacent McCarran Park. So when you walk down this site, literally there are 30 trees here. There are about half of those are lifting the pavement, and about half of those again are breaking the fence between where the trees are and the open planters. So I really like this design. I think the CU soil in this case helped the trees in establishment, but not longevity. The main problem with CU soil, from my perspective, is that it's only 20% usable soil, whereas a product like mine or a soil cell will be 95% soil. The trees don't read the rock. The rock does nothing for the tree at all. And is that Al Key saying that oh, this sales guy from Deep Root who's biased? No. This is Cornell that has said this, right? So this is a container study that Nina Baskic and Jason Roboski put together a long time ago, and they took a container study and they looked at amounts of structural soil, and then the amount of loam that was being held in the structural soil, that's the small box, and compared it with a similar size large loam box. So CU soil on the left there, and then say silva cells or soil cells over on the right. And lo and behold, the large loam outperformed the structural soil markedly. See that green arc up there? That is what the Cornell's research shows. So if you look at net soil volume, the price per cubic foot is less in soil cell systems. So if you had 1,000 cubic feet of CU soil, you'd only get 200 cubic feet of soil, and 200 cubic feet of silva cell or soil cells would be half the price, right? So what about in the field? I would say that we collect these things, all right? This happens to be in Boise, Idaho, all across the nation. This was conceived as an us and them test by the city arborist. Trees on the left there, or in the little red box, are in CU soil, and the trees on the right are in silva cells. This was a single contract, same nursery, same trees, right? Therein lies the difference in performance. Something a little more local, this is up in Greenwich Avenue. The trees on the left there are in soil cells, and the the trees along Railroad Avenue, that's just directly underneath those wires there, are all in CU soil. You can see the difference. So it's the single contract, same nursery, same trees, but just this is not a test or anything else, like the developer ran out of money. Given the nature of those lines there, the electric overhead lines, the CU soil in this case was not a bad choice, because it would just if it was in, yeah, I think any arborist can see that immediately. And in St. Paul, same contractors, same nursery, different trees. The trees over on the left of the side, those are in silvocels. The trees in the middle are in open planters, and the CU soil trees are over here on the right, exhibiting early fall color. And then the closest one that I have in the state is University Avenue in Syracuse, New York, planted 2011, photo from 2019, single contract, same nursery, but different trees. I think you can see that obviously the trees on the left are all in a bank of silvocels there. The CU soil is underneath the bike path and over to that porous paving on the right. So when you, so if you have I think it's important to remember that the area of the soil will match the area of the canopy. The ratio of the canopy to the soil is 1:1. But if you're using CU soil, the ratio of area to canopy is 5:1. So you need 5 times the amount of soil to get the original, to get the same amount of soil that you would with silvocels or soil cells. And I would like to say that because the cost of silvocels on a net volume basis is much less than CU soil, then I would say that it would be a waste of taxpayer money to install CU soil for new tree planting. There, I said it. The next one is sand-based structural soil. Sand-based structural soil has a wide use primarily in New England, and there are a few in New York. I'll show you pictures. This has a dichotomy about it, which is unacceptable to the urban forestry industry. It's settlement when it's below 90%. So think of broken sidewalks, that kind of stuff. And it's root limiting when compacted above 85%. And it's got to be irrigated. Also, the soil has limited organics, maybe 1.5 organic matter at the most, achieved through by compost. This was developed by Els Kronenberg in Amsterdam, where they have sand everywhere. This is irrigation dependent, and it works in Amsterdam. And the reason why is they have an uncompacted downtown, along the various canals and things like that. They don't have a 95% compaction deal there, and it looks good because, or a 95% compaction standard, and it looks good because this 17th century city, the cobblestones move and there's no big deal. Likewise, the water level is discrete. It is controlled by dike. So freshwater lens forms over the salt water, and the trees derive, they don't need irrigation because of this freshwater lens that forms over the water, over the salt water. Really cool. And talk to Els Kronenberg about it. She's a lovely lady. She's actually in England now. The largest use of a sand-based structural soil is at the World Trade Center in New York City, the site of the 9/11 memorial. These are Quercus bicolor, and the trees look really great. And the reason why here, they are irrigated, but it is 95% compacted soil. So why on earth do the trees look so good if I'm trying to throw sand-based structural soil into the bus? And the truth here is this is unparalleled nursery practice. Each one of these trees came in on an individual tractor trailer, and those root balls are 10 feet by 10 feet by 6 feet deep. That means that each one of those trees has 600 cubic feet of soil just in its root ball. Again, unparalleled nursery practice, and this, in my humble opinion, the sand-based structural soil has little to do with the performance of the trees in that regard. This is a more typical example of what I would say are the performance of sand-based structural soil. And obviously we want the trees on the left, or on the right rather. This is an uncompacted area, the pavement's moving. Additionally, that irrigated land right out, irrigated lawn there is fertilized, and the trees are obviously living in that particular area on the Koch Center in Cambridge. And over on the right there, left rather, is some ginkgos that were planted, and this is where compaction was achieved. So again, if it's uncompacted and you're okay with pavement heaving, then and you want to irrigate it, it will work. However, when you compact it and irrigate it, it becomes you get dead trees and performance on the left there. Great. Okay, so those are the two main types of structural soils. There are other kinds of structural soils too. There's Stockholm-based structural soils, which is similar to Cornell University soil. And so I hope I made it clear that neither of these things beats out soil cells. And so I would like to say that this is my least favorite topic to talk about. I get really emotional about all this sort of stuff. So my apologies, but I will say it is a very confusing market out there. There are 16 different types of soil cells, and there's a lot of hooey and misinformation going around the industry as well. I can assure you that mine is the best. All right. In fact, it is the largest of all these ones because we've always wanted to have free movement of roots and free movement of water within the cells. But because it's the largest unit on the market, our PSI is lower, right? And I would like to say that, it's almost like a bunch of dumb jocks in a gym room comparing, well, my PSI is bigger than your PSI. PSI is not an accurate measure of load. You'll see that just heel pressure walking is higher, has a higher PSI than a low impact track grader that Brett was talking about. I love that slide of yours, Brett, by the way. The load is prescribed by AASHTO, that's the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, and this is the heaviest thing on the U.S. highway. All of these manufacturers, regardless of type, design their specifications to this particular standard. But when the less expensive ones, the ones that have less plastic, have less testing, this kind of thing, require different amounts of concrete and different amounts of aggregate and concrete paving buildup over the top. So these are the Silva-Cell numbers. The most common application we have with Silva-Cells is you get 4 inches of concrete and 4 inches of aggregate. Beats AASHTO H20 with a safety factor of nearly 2, right? PSI is not even on this thing. It's irrelevant. So one thing I can assure you about Silva-Cells, we have tested our every single one of our models by crushing it in an independent lab. So that is not the case with many manufacturers. They tested one thing, they've tested another thing, and they have different models. Make sure that you confirm the testing. And why is that important? Because these things are traffic rated, not rated for heavier loads like cranes. And if you need to put an extendable boom on top of these things, we can make that calculation for you, and our competitors can't. There are also many false claims out there. For example, we do not allow even though the silver cells are traffic rated, we do not suggest you put them in roadways between those two yellow lines there on the left. That's actually in Cumberland, Maryland. Beautiful new streetscape that was installed a couple of years ago. And whereas people will say, oh yeah, sure, they're traffic rated, we can put them in the roadway. There is a real problem with rutting and pavement wear down. Given that we have prescribed amounts of aggregate buildup over the cells, if you can get a civil engineer to say, yeah, that pavement's never going to degrade, then we can put them in in travel lanes. Unfortunately, you're not going to get a civil engineer to say, oh yeah, it's a great idea. And that's the reason why we put them off to the side in pedestrian places, parking spaces, plaza areas, things of this nature. There's plenty of room in these streetscapes to put lots of soil cells in there. Likewise, there's some red herrings out the industry in that they say, oh, well, what about lateral loads? Well, lateral loads are, like you've seen pavement moving, that kind of stuff. But it takes a lot of pressure and a lot of force in order to move a curb. We designed to AASHTO H20, and you see the red lines over there on the left. If there's 60 millimeters of flexion in a curb, then it requires over I think it's like 50 kilonewtons that's 50 millimeters of flexion is on 90 kilonewtons. That's a kilonewton is over 2,000 pounds. It is just a really ridiculous. It's a lot of pressure. So what I'm saying here is the traffic lateral loads are very light, and you shouldn't really. It's not a concern in these things. In these systems. Lateral loads, the heaviest lateral loads are hydrostatic loads. So and then if you have a retaining wall and water falls behind it and freezes, that's an issue. If you have one of these systems, just make sure that it drains, and all of our systems drain. That's a thing with the nature of soil cells in general is that they all drain and they all percolate water. We live in the urban environment, and some of the manufacturers say, oh yeah, you can cut our material. There is no testing for this. It voids the warranty. I would never say, let's accommodate this utility by testing it. And that's the reason why our silver cell is completely independent from the others. So you can snake utilities through it. You can put the bases down, run your utilities through, and then fill it up with soil if you like. I have a whole presentation, 100 slides showing various different utility things, whether it's light pole footings, kiosk footings, fire hydrants. These things are all well thought out. How do you repair them? Like a person like Brett, I'm sure would be very interested in how do I get to the utilities, and even talked about that a little bit. Rest assured, we can address those concerns. We live in the public right-of-way, which is a shared resource with sewer, electric, fiber optic, gas, and et cetera. However, probably the biggest issue with soil cells is this notion of soil installation. The majority of the systems out there are a cap and sift system. So what that means is you put all the caps on, you get the thing completely installed, and then start filling them up with soil. And this leads to settlement within the thing, and the settlement can be up to 20%, right? So if you're going to get a cap and sift system and sweep the soil in over the top like this, please show up with a water truck and compact the system with water. That's a long process. We generally like to build our systems dry. Introducing water into a construction site can be problematic and increase costs. So that's the reason why we designed the Silvacell to be a filled and cap system. And also this destroys the soil structure as well. So I would suggest that, if you're looking at soil cell systems, look at one which is not a cap and sift type system. And then to sort of finish it up, I'd like to talk about the research that Bartlett Tree has done in North Carolina. This is put together by, Tom Smiley. And Tom Smiley is a great researcher. Right now, he's doing work on how tree opening size affects tree response, that sort of stuff. But in this particular case, and this is a while ago now, I can't believe it's almost 10 years or 9 years since they pulled these things out. But they looked at Silvacells, sand-based structural soil, gravel-based structural soil, Stratocell, and then they also had a non-compacted control, that would be a tree and an open planter, and then a compacted control that's compacted up to 95% with concrete over it. In this study, there were two different types of statistical corollaries, in that load-bearing modules with loam is best, period, right? In terms of tree height, tree diameter, it's just, there was no question in this case that load-bearing modules with loam worked out really well, or was better in all cases than the other ones. And the load-bearing modules with loams were roughly equivalent to the uncompacted control. And in these structural soil ones, some structural soils did not outperform the compacted control. We'll get into that a little bit. So basically, the load-bearing module with loam is the best way to go. Just show you some different metrics that Tom did. Number of roots, the Fowler ratings, they're all different. Loam outperformed the structural soil and the compacting controls in all cases. A picture, however, is worth 1,000 words. So here we have the two controls on the right and the 4 treatments on the left. The non-compacted control, that's the open planter one, looks pretty good, right? And if you look at Silvacells and Stratocells, they are roughly equivalent, right? Whereas if you looked at the 95% compacted control, it's just about as good as, or the gravel-based structural soil, or CU soil in this case. Those look very similar as well. However, the sand-based structural soil did not outperform the compacted control. So this is when I say sand-based, gravel-based structurals, or any kind of structural soil, is not worth the money of installation. This is the data that I'm using to bring that home. I think the way Brett was using it is an excellent way to use it. Like in these places that you can't put a cell in. I think that's an excellent way to do that. We have used gravel-based structural soil, CU soil, in our installations as well, as a sub-base, as to filling corners that we can't get into it. CU structural soil is the most carefully researched structural soil out there. So, and it's carefully controlled in terms of licensure and product and stuff like that. So in my humble opinion, if you're going to use it like Brett did, that's the one you want to go with. The CU structural soil is the one. But for new tree planting, where you can, please, both gravel-based structural soil, sand-based structural soil are a waste of money there. Yeah, and then a notion about filling and settlement. The Stratocell is a cap and sift product, and it is over there on the left. So they install the system, and then you fill it. You drop the soil in there afterwards. The middle photograph here is them trying to smush, that's a technical term, smush more soil into there. And if you look at the numbers, not only did, for these cap and sift systems, did they get less soil in it, but it also settled much more than the fill and cap systems like the Silvacell in this case. So I hope I have not been too biased in my presentation. I try to keep the technical stuff at bay in terms of installation and how wonderful my products are and that kind of stuff. A picture is worth 1,000 words. This is another installation in New York City in Waterline Square, a plaza area in Silvacells, roughly about 8 years old now. So with that, hopefully I will take some questions.
Great, thank you, Al. And thank you for adding Silvacells and soil cells to our toolboxes. I think the stormwater management benefits alone are amazing. And never mind the opportunity to give trees that we're trying to grow the longevity that they need to get all the benefits from them. So thank you.
Of course.
We had a bunch of questions in the chat, and the one that I want to make sure that the people in the back here is regarding the difference between using native soils and processed soils. Can you talk more about that?
Sure. Well, I would say that I'm not too sure what you mean by native soils. And you said native soils and topsoils?
Or yeah, the processed soils and unprocessed soils.
Yeah. Well, I would say that in processed soils, there are 3 different components. There's topsoil, which is the soil on the top, and we don't really know what it is, but that has organic matter and that kind of stuff. And then there is sand that they put into that for drainage. And then there's a compost component as well. For most places, a sandy clay loam with about 3 to 5% organic matter, a pH suited to the plants, and about 10% compost at max is going to do great, regardless of how much clay there is, or how much sand there is, or how much silt there is. That's generally how it's going to work. The idea would be to not process the soils as much. What the question was in between topsoils and processed soils, is that it?
Or when you were talking about the soil to use to fill the cells up.
Yep.
There's the screened soil and versus the unscreened soil.
Correct.
Yeah. And what are the benefits between the two, or the benefits of using unscreened soil?
Unscreened soil is much better. I can send you the research from Sandra Day, and I mentioned his name earlier, University of North Carolina, Barrett Case. The research is clear. Unscreened planting soils outperform screen planting soils in all cases. But basically, manufactured soil is you go down to the yard, and then you say, oh, I want 10% compost, I want 40% sand and 60% topsoil, and then they mix it all together, put it through a screening process, and then what's have you delivered to the site. What I would prefer doing is that when you're developing your site, pull you pull the topsoil from the site, put it over to one side, send it off to a testing lab to figure out if it needs amendment or not. Likely the topsoil will not. If it's in these urban environments, if you there will be no topsoil, remnant topsoil at all left. So that's when you have to start going out to the sites and saying, okay, well, what are the sources and what are the sources for this material? I don't want this stuff screened at all. Yeah, that's about what I need to say.
So
Amy, if
the
I
best
can
place-
add to that
Oh,
Sure.
yes, please.
for a second. I've been on many commercial installations where the contractor and the landscape architect brought in screen soil, and they said, no, we had it tested. It's exactly where we want it to be on the texture triangle. It's a sandy loam, it's a silty loam, it's a clay loam, it's perfect. But yet it was compacted to the density of concrete because all of the structure was removed in the screening process. So everybody focuses on texture. I think in many places, texture is less important and structure is more critical for good tree development.
Correct.
And I
I
learned that
agree.
from Jim Urban.
And it's in his book.
I did too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have to amend soil, use compost
Correct. And don't screen it.
and don't screen it.
Yeah, just mix it up with a bucket loader. That would be great. PEDs are your friends. Again, my rule of thumb is soil is a bit like food. The less processed, the better.
Okay, and for our next question, I'm going to ask Brent to turn his camera on because he asked it about DOT specs.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Amy. Let me
Yep.
go back to the question. I was curious for Al. Has there been any progress in coordinating with state DOTs to have soil cells added to the DOT material list? For the webinar's reference, some municipal street projects are funded through grant types, such as state grants, which require adherence to DOT requirements, or otherwise you have to go through an appeal process to get authorization for non-listed materials. New York State right now, there's no soil cells listed under the DOT materials list. And I'd be curious to know if there's been any updates or progress.
The short answer to your question is no. However, we have looked into these things in various states. And one of the biggest problems is that they do not have a category under which soil cells fit. So is it a subbase? No. Is it a rock? No. Is it is it a guardrail? These are all the things that are on New York State DOT approved materials lists. So right now, the only process we have, Brett, is to get a variance from the controlling entity. And we do have state DOT projects. The stuff in Syracuse, those multiple projects up there are all state funded and done to state specs. Also, we have state DOT funding in Manhattan as well. So there's along certain roads, 125th Street, I think. Stuff like that. So it is possible, but it's not on the approved materials list. Good question.
Peter? Yeah. Brent, while you're on here, you may as well do your second question.
Great.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we should take this offline, Brett.
Well, I mean, these questions are a little bit for the benefit of people listening as well, because I've done some research into these things because, we've talked a lot about today about when to use different things with the ultimate goal of providing uncompacted soil for trees. But so my second question is, can you share any info on plastic creep measurements for something like soil cells? For anyone else who might be listening, not familiar with the term plastic creep, think about like a plastic bookshelf where you put a heavy weight on it and then slowly that shelf sags over time. So Civil engineers may, and in my experience have, shared concerns about plastic creep under paved surfaces over time.
Yeah, that's a really nerdy question, Brett, and I think nerds rule. So thank you very much for asking it. Again, just to go back to say what creep is that if plastic is loaded, it'll come back 99.99%. It'll be loaded again, it come back 99.99% again. And that's the reason why we selected the specific type of thermoplastics that's in the silver cell, is because the creep factors are next to nil. All of our finite element analysis that they use to build submarines and rocket ships and everything else like that shows that there's minimal degradation over time with the silver cells, and the modeling goes out 100 years. So silver cells have been in the ground for since 2006, so about 20 years now, and we have not had a single failure of silver cells. And what I mean by that is that, we've had misinstallations and things like that, but we carry warranty insurance. Warranty insurance is, like if you come to say, oh, well, the silver cells failed and you owe me $1 million, I give it to my warranty insurer. In the 20 years that silver cells have been in business, we have never had a claim of that on our warranty insurance. I can tell you that it is a very what am I saying here? What was the question? Of course, I'm losing myself here.
That's all right now.
Creep. It was about creep. Yeah, so it's a minimal thing. If you need more information on it, I can get you numbers on creep if you'd like.
Yeah, just for everyone listening, This question was a little bit just for the audience purpose. I've reached out and gotten this information before, and you all were happy to provide it for your product. Your plastic creep is 1/4 inch over 100 years.
Oh,
I think that may be considered a reasonable amount of sagging or settlement for, say, like a concrete sidewalk to only have 1/4 inch over 100 years.
Thank you. Send me that
Thank
data.
Well, it seems we're
And
getting close
somebody
to.
asked if there was is there an alternative to plastic? And yes, there is an alternative to plastic, and there are several ways to do it. But that's the reason why I went through those custom systems. So those tend to be a lot more expensive, but if you have the money, they work great. So plastic is really inexpensive to put in the ground, and there's no mining, or there's no anyway. So that's what I'm saying is that yes, you don't have to do this stuff in plastic, but plastic tends to be the cheapest alternative in terms of soil vaults or soil cells. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. That's about our time for today. Christina has let us all know that this recording and an email with all the supporting information, it's going to be an email chock filled with information, will be sent out next week. And I'd like to thank all of our presenters and all of you for your great questions. And I'm so lucky to have such a great crew to help me with developing these types of this type of programming for our Hudson Valley ReLeaf network, never mind the whole rest of the country that came here today. So thank you very much for that. And let me see if I have anything else to add. Yeah, the relationships that we create between tree roots and soil are what's going to get us through. So always keep it in mind every time you're planning a planting project and dealing with a root conflict, that type of thing. There are ways to get out of it, as long as you know that tree roots need air, water, and nutrients, and can't get through compacted soil, can't deal with not having any soil. And on that note, I think that we can call this webinar successful, and thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.